Looking over today's readings in the light of yesterday's joyful celebrations, I was reminded of the classic song, "What a Difference a Day Makes." Yesterday in the Gospel readings we had the Word made flesh. We had angelic choirs, worshipful shepherds, and the baby Jesus. Then suddenly there is a sharp turn. Because today we have no cuddly babies or joyful choruses. Instead, we have a young man, Stephen, stoned to death, and after that, Jesus' chilling warnings of sufferings and trials to come. What a difference a day makes indeed. But if we look at the Gospel of Matthew, from which today's Gospel passage comes, we see that the Gospel passage we have just heard itself represents a sharp turn in that narrative. In the chapters leading up to the Gospel for today, we have the crowd gathering around to hear Jesus' every word, then Jesus going about and performing the most extraordinary miracles and being much celebrated. Then he gathers his disciples and starts to send them out. It is at this point, when everything seems to be going very well, that the sharp turn occurs, and with little warning, Jesus suddenly declares, "Beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake to bear testimony before them and the Gentiles. Brother will deliver up brother to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake." Now that the sharp turn has been taken, and the hard realities have been acknowledged explicitly, things cannot go back for the disciples to what they were before. Something similar happened to St. Stephen. He too is going about, as the Acts of the Apostles tells us, performing great signs and miracles among the people. It was all going tremendously well. And then there is a sharp turn in the narrative when we are told that some were seeking to catch Stephen out. And following a discourse in which Stephen reinterpreted salvation history from a distinctively Christian perspective and was critical of the temple authorities, they took against Stephen, and he was stoned to death, the first of many Christian martyrs. Given the sharp contrast between the tone of yesterday's readings and those of today, one might wonder what is going on. Why has the Church chosen to locate its feasts in this way? Why have the compilers of the lectionary chosen such painful readings when it's still Christmas? There might be all sorts of historical reasons that research could dig out, but some straightforwardly obvious reasons present themselves, not least catechetical and pastoral. Thus, if we're ever tempted to think of Christmas in sentimental terms, today's feast, which is very much part of Christmas, after all, we're still in the Christmas octave, gives good catechesis regarding the fundamental depth to Christmas, a depth that can positively encourage rejoicing and celebration, but which nonetheless reminds us that there are many different aspects to the infinitely rich mystery of Christmas, including that the one whose birth we celebrate will in time die on the cross. And pastoral reasons are not difficult to work out either. After all, there are many who suffer or who are going through tough times. Life can, alas, sometimes be difficult, hard, unfair, cruel. These aspects of the human experience, as well as those involving joy and celebration, need to be acknowledged in our liturgies. The Church appreciates this. Today's feast acknowledges it, and in this respect is pastorally sensitive as well. But there are also theological reasons. The most obvious of these theological reasons keeps the difficulties of life in view, but in so doing emphasizes hope all the more. If the infant Christ were destined simply for a milieu of ease and absence of pain, then this would not be the God who brings the good news to the poor and to those who are oppressed. This would not be the God who is willing to share in the fragility and pain of the human condition. In other words, by reminding us of the difficulties within the human condition, and that it is into this world and its realities that God has entered, we are in effect shown something of the sheer depth of the love of God for us, for you and for me. That God loves each one of us so much that he comes into our reality, warts and all, not only its heights, but also its depths. What a difference a day makes. Fair enough. But the love of God revealed in the child in the manger remains the same in days of pain and in days of joy.